Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, if you're hearing this, you know that it's Friday and getting ready to kick off the weekend. And it is that second weekend in June, and I will be headed to California. Be going to the DKP meet on Friday night, and then after the DKP meet, I'm going to go ahead and be at EMPI on Saturday. So Adam Wick and myself will be live streaming. So if you're not going to be in Southern California on Saturday, go to EMPI's YouTube page and subscribe so that way you make sure you get to see your favorite podcast host with one of your favorite podcast guests, Adam Wick, as we give you the play-by-play on the final championship round of the Engine Dyno 2024 build-off with EMPI. I'm pretty excited about going down and getting to do that. I was going to bring a cart, but I don't think... Here's news flash. The Bull Run bus is on my trailer, loaded up, and it's getting dropped off at my buddy Kenny Fitzer. If you haven't checked out Kenny Fitzer, go back and listen to the podcast we did with him. In addition to that, he's currently building another one of those wide body buses for himself, completely from scratch, all the metal. He's building everything, and go check him out to see where he's getting all the metal and all that good stuff. And it's going to be a 900 horsepower drift bus electric. So he should have it done for SEMA. If we're lucky, we'll get it at one crazy weekend. I'll stop and see him because I'm dropping off the Bull Run bus to him. No, I'm not doing a wide body conversion, even though I thought about it. But the reality is I'm sending it to him. George is swamped at his shop, and I'm going to get the top half of that thing painted and get him to squirt some stuff for me, and then I'll be dragging it back home probably the following weekend. But definitely excited to see that project making some headway. But before we get into this podcast, let's go ahead and support our sponsors, VW Trends Magazine. After a long hiatus, back on the scene with funky, fresh, dope features, how-tos, and coverage of shows you don't get in other magazines. So make sure you go subscribe today at VWTrendsMagazine.com. Also, Ross Wolf, Jared and Jason, two guys, love Volkswagens, design and engineer parts that fit. Parts that work, and high performance aftermarket parts built for enthusiasts by enthusiasts. So go check them out today at Ross Wolf with a U, rosswolf.com. Pick up some cool gear for your car. I've got cool gear on my car. I've got the solid shift couplers. I've got velocity stacks. I've got the dash cover. I've got a million things from Ross Wolf and friends of the show. And I like guys that have passion in something they do and are willing to put their money where their mouth is. A lot of people complain about stuff, and they don't muster up the cash to do something. These guys put the money up, decided to have some parts manufactured, and they're hardcore enthusiasts. So go check them out today at rosswolf.com. Now, I thought it would only be fitting, since I'm going to be at EMPI this weekend, that today's podcast, I'm going to do an abbreviated history of EMPI and some of the aftermarket stuff that started way back in the day. So it's not going to be super, super detailed, but we're going to kind of run through the history of EMPI in the early days and the aftermarket Volkswagen accessory scene. So without any further ado, guys, let's get into it this week. Bill T, history of EMPI on Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Well, guys, today on the podcast, we're going to be doing some EMPI history. Since I'm going to be at EMPI this weekend at the EMPI Engine Battle 2024, Adam Wick and myself will be live streaming that from EMPI during the final round for the title to see who wins the EMPI Engine Battle by their dealers. A lot of cool people that are going to be there, and we'll kind of do that whole engine battle, go over all the details of who's going to be there and what cars have made the final. So, or what engines, I should say. So I'm excited to do that. It's going to be a good time. Make sure you guys check it out. There'll definitely be a lot of information, and not from me, from Adam Wick, but me. I'm going to give you the commentary and a bunch of nonsense. So that's what I bring to the table. But one of the things I wanted to talk about on today's podcast, and yes, it's Bill T solo, so we're going to see how this goes, guys. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I wanted to touch on some EMPI history from back in the day, kind of how it started and all the details, or some of the details in between, and not everything, right? So I'm sure there'll be some people that say, oh, he missed this and he didn't get that. But the reality is, if you don't know the history of EMPI, I'm going to give you the thumbnail sketch of some of EMPI's history, how it started, and how these things got together. So now I'm going to do this kind of one of two ways, right? So I've got a bunch of history that I've read. I've also got people that I've interviewed, Joe Horvath being one of them. Now, Joe Horvath is one of the few guys that's still around to this day that was there in the early days of EMPI. And if you haven't heard that podcast, go back and listen to episode 61 with Joe Horvath. So in the beginning, he was the first employee that was hired at the body shop. And before I get ahead of myself, let me set the place. It's in Riverside, California, and there's a guy named Joe Vitone who opens a dealership called Econo Motors. He has a body shop guy that he hires, and that's Joe Horvath. Now, during this time, there's a bunch of guys that start getting hired over there, and these guys are all guys that are coming back pretty much from the war. They learned a skill set, and a lot of guys are gearheads that are coming there. And so these guys like to tinker, and as they see a mountain of cylinder heads piling up, the genesis of what will future be known as EMPI is changing the valve guides. Now, Volkswagen had said the cylinder heads are no longer rebuildable once the valve guides are worn out, and to replace the cylinder heads completely. But Econo Motors had a guy by the name of Joe Hoy working there, who was an ex-engineer for the Packard Motor Company. He came up with a way to change the valve guides, and that's what put EMPI on the map. Before they knew it, they were shipping valve guides all over the world for people to rebuild cylinder heads and put new valves in them. That was the launching point for them to separate the company and start something called EMPI. With ex-engineers on hand, they would go into start. That was their bread and butter, was the valve guides. Then they started to offer a catalog. The first catalog comes out in 1958. Now, this catalog that comes out, it says accessory items to enhance your driving pleasure. And it's for Fiat, Porsche, Renault, and Volkswagen. And the name EMPI is referred to by European Motor Products, Inc. Now, when you get into that catalog, and I thought it'd be fun to do it from the perspective of the catalog, like what is available. And so the name European Motor Products means they were shipping in a lot of products from Europe, mostly a lot of Okrasa. And as you go through their new catalog, there's obviously Okrasa engine kits, motor engine kits that'll take your 36 horse and pump it up to like 50 horsepower, and oil coolers they had a cool thing called the EMPI filter cooler, and it looked like a beehive that went in your engine compartment, and it tapped in from your oil pressure setting switch and then back into the cooler, is I'm assuming where the other line goes to, and it would have extra oil capacity, a filter inside there, and the finned action would make it cool your motor oil a little bit better. So other things they obviously had the 36 horsepower stroker kit, which would pump your 36 horse motor up to your 1192 up to 1286, an increase in 94 cc. So now obviously browsing through the catalog gives you an idea of the things that they were selling. And a lot of the pieces and parts were things that I don't think they necessarily manufacture, but they were importing from Europe. Some things obviously they would manufacture, but they would have, split boots for repair, for axle boot repairs, right? The factory ones were one piece. They had bumper support guards. They had seat recliners, magnetic drain plugs back in their 1958 catalog. One thing that I had a long time ago in one of my buses was a chrome handle that had like an ivory strap in it. Well, that handle is available in their catalog. So glove box pulls and the door pulls, a lot of those parts and pieces, they had a full, for your 1958 full set of gauges where you get an amp, you get your clock, you get a rev counter, and you get the what's the other one here? I think it's a fuel gauge, But yeah, it's fuel gauge, cylinder head temp, amps, a lot of cool stuff that they had, and most of it, and those gauges were all VDO. So antennas and, gasket sets, all type of things that were kind of performance minded. Now, as you move on to the 1963 through 64 catalog, it's still referred to as the EMPI Motoring Guide. And some of the things that are for sale, this one's got a lot less catalog-esque aspect to it, a lot more reading, and then some smaller, information, mostly accessories, seat recliners, fuel filters, the camber compensators, the first time it appears in a catalog, and then the Guardian bus step. One of the cool things I noticed in the second gen catalog was the Zenith carburetor for a single port engine. That I think would be pretty cool, especially if you've got an early single port, just to bolt that dude on there, because this would obviously have been set up for a 40 horse. But they also sold, aftermarket shocks that you could put that improve the ride of the Volkswagen, as well as a bunch of manuals, right? So they had Renault manual for a Dauphine, and they also had, souping up your Volkswagen manual, which I think I've got one of those. I've always ended up, going to swap meets and buying things to that extent. But they've got a diagram of a Beetle that has all of the accessories that you would think to buy. You've got fender mirrors, you've got, beauty rings, gravel guards, nail guards for the door handles, rain deflectors, the tinted piece that you flip down in front of your day-night mirror. I guess they'd want to call that, your little flap there. And then also, this is the first time where I see the vent, where they would cut in a fresh air vent underneath the gas tank that you could open, and they sold it with the hole saw too. So you could get an extra vent. It was called the all-weather fresh air, and enjoy your yours to enjoy with the EMPI vent. So the EMPI vent was the piece you drilled a hole just above your reserve switch, and they sold you the EMPI vent cutting tool for $850, and the vent itself was $395. So the EMPI vent was one of the things they had. The Magic Muffler is one of the first things that I see right there. The EMPI dual carburetor kit with dual 28 BP one Solexes. A lot of performance pieces. The stroker cranks, the 1300cc cranks. And then they started advertising a product called Molly Coat, which is like a fluid concentrate that you just added in to your engine oil. They also have in here the X100 kit. So around that time is when they're doing, the stroker crank kit for your 40 horse motor. So a lot of pretty cool stuff. I see the glove box clocks. So many things that we see at the swap meets today, reverse lights, backup lights for your Volkswagen, because Volkswagen didn't have backup lights until 1967 is when they came factory owned Volkswagens for the most part, at least US specs. So a lot of, first time I'm seeing some valve springs in their catalog in the 63 to 64, some Coco floor mats, tap and die sets for Volkswagens, which are pretty cool. Sync meter for your dual car, Blaupunk radio, a lot of different parts and pieces. And I see the Hazit toolkit that's advertised in that catalog. So, and this is, again, we're staying 1963 to 64 catalog. And then I see for fashion hint for Corvairs and Volkswagens, it's a steering wheel. It looks like the steering wheel that was on pole position in the game, the one that chop your finger off, you stuck your hand in it while it was spinning. It looks like a really uncomfortable wheel, and it's kind of a universal wheel that looks like it was built for a universal, a couple of universal fits, and it's advertised as for a Volkswagen and a Corvair. So start selling some NGK plugs through the catalog, and then also offer, there's a lot of additional pieces in here for performance and little informational pieces, but a lot of things in that catalog that I'm seeing for the first time, like the carb sync tool, the accelerator pedal, That's the cruiser style pedal, the EMPI map light that goes underneath the dash. And that's really what I'm looking at here is a lot of the firsts, like the first time I see those things in the catalogs. So as you go on to the next catalog in EMPI in 1966, you'll notice that the first thing that they show in the 66 catalog is the 5-lug Sprint Star. So the new wheel available by EMPI, at the time, this wheel was $39.50 each. So if you do the math at like a minimum wage of like $1.50 an hour, that's a couple of days work to buy a wheel. But it's the first time that I see a steering wheel advertised in their catalog where it's the Riverside 500 wheel, which, by the way, that's the same wheel that I've got in my GTV Bug, which I think it's a fairly rare wheel. I haven't seen a ton of them. They're definitely not as popular as GTV wheels. It's a 4-spoke that looks a lot like a 912 wheel. Matter of fact, it's advertised as, X-spoke design similar to the 912 steering wheel. And it's got, the elegant leather horn button with the EMPI embossed logo. So fairly rare wheel. Pretty cool to see that on there. And in this catalog, they start advertising some of their racing. So you can see how the racing and the performance stuff starts to bleed into their catalog, as well as they start to offer up some of the Speedwell parts and pieces. They've got a catalog, a few pages here committed to Graham Hill's company Speedwell, and showing that they're starting to bring in the EMPI Speedwell catalog, which is separate, and you got to send $1.50 for that. But it gives detailed information on performance parts from Speedwell. Now, as you go through the rest in this year, you see this EMPI Sportster, which looks like a car that's built on a sheet metal brake, right? It's all 90-degree angle pieces that are contoured and put together to make a dune buggy. Because obviously at this time, if you're going back in history, around 1963 or 62 is when Bruce Meyer starts to get real popular with the dune buggy, and everybody's trying to catch on, come up with something. And EMPI actually comes up with the steel-bodied kit of this EMPI Sportster. So some of these have been around, and I've seen some people get them running and put them on the road, and they're actually pretty cool. They were made to kind of have as a dune buggy and just tow behind you. And if you were looking for the deluxe Sportster kit, or the super deluxe, right, which came with exhaust, wheels, roll bar, skid plate, that was $1,000 back then, which, if you think about it, it's a lot of money. But that's the first time that I see a buggy type thing available in their catalog. So now, also at this time, Formula V racing is getting really popular, and so you start to see Formula V kits that they're offering to be sold, and take your Volkswagen chassis and just build a Formula V. So ran into a guy at a swap meet not long ago that had a bunch of Formula V parts, and he said he had a 40 horse motor there, and it was the long block, and he was asking like $6,500 for it. And he says, man, that's a great deal, because to have those motors built, because they do everything they can to try to squeeze every little ounce of power out of them, because they're monitored. They have to be factory. They've got so they're light and they're balanced. They're dialed in as much as they can without changing the displacement at all, and they are pretty expensive. I think the guy said they run about $10,000. So Formula V became all the rage. So you start to see some of that. Now they're still selling the 1300 kits, and by this time, when this catalog comes out in 1965, you're about to get the 1300. Well, they've got a 1500 stroker kit to sell you. So they're still offering Okrasa kits at this time, as well as the Ram induction power kits, which is the Zenith carburetor, the manifold, and the distributor. One of the interesting things in this catalog in 1960 and 1965 is the Shorrock supercharger. So that's one that it actually almost looks a little bit like a turbo. It's kind of a radial design, and it's a bolt-on supercharger kit that goes on your Volkswagen, and the complete kit is about $400. So they made them for 1300s and for 1200s. So, and I think those are pretty rare. I haven't seen a ton of those out and about. And now in the catalog at this point, EMPI is actually starting to sell the valve guide toolkit. So they made how to replace your own valve guides. They had a toolkit for $20 where you could do your own valve guides or all the valve guides for your buddies in the neighborhood. So there's lots of different things coming out in the catalog. This is the first catalog where I see in 1965, I see the fan belt guard, which just takes up the gap in your fan belt between the pulley and the crankshaft, the alternator pulley and the generator pulley and the crankshaft pulley. So it's the first time that I see that being advertised. And then lots of other Astro Sparks, like performance. The Transit Spark for reliability is like an add-on coil for your Volkswagen that gives you a little hotter spark, smoother running. I've actually pulled a few of those off of a car or two when I bought one. I think I might even have one in a box somewhere in my garage. Now they're also selling VW and Porsche stock parts in this catalog, as well as the EMPI extractor exhaust, which is the 4-bolt square flange exhaust. That's in your 1965 catalog. And one of the more interesting things that I see in here is the Corvair conversion kit. So they've got a single cab here in the picture, and the whole back end's chopped up. It's got a custom made steel platform bumper, and it's a conversion kit and an adapter to put the Corvair motor inside the Volkswagen, preferably your pickup truck, so you can use the big power boost of a 100 horsepower motor versus your 40 horsepower engine and be able to get substantial power for your Volkswagen pickup truck. And one of the reasons why I thought reviewing the catalog had more value to me is because this is showing me when these things are through R&D and they're actually available to the public. Buy that. Now you see a lot of the EMPI extractor exhausts are real big in 1965. So there's tons of those. They've got some advertised for Porsches, camber compensators again, as well as sway bars for the front and some of their different wheels they have now. So now they're starting to offer the mag type wheels by Raider. And so they've got the Raider wheels in here. They've got the slotted chrome wheels, and obviously gauge sets. And now I start to see the EMPI solid state tachometer, which is the first tachometer that I see in the catalog. And I have one of these now. With the EMPI gauges, they have white needle gauges and orange needle gauges when you're like collecting EMPI gauges. Some of them, the orange ones are later, the white ones are earlier. The white ones take like for the oil pressure, it takes an actual tube that goes back to your oil sending unit, and you run a tube that's got pressurized oil in it up to the gauge. Now, one of the things in this catalog in 1965, because what they always did is they sold seat covers that went over to protect your seats. Now, this one has plaid seat covers, and I've never seen a set of these plaid seat covers, nor have I seen the GT style bucket seats anywhere. So, and these were Speedwell parts. So these GT style bucket seats were definitely kind of funky. It almost looks like a seat to be in a conversation pit, but I have seen hardly any of these. And in this catalog, you really start to see EMPI unload the entire collection of steering wheels. So they've got everything from the coach style wheel in here to the universal wheel, and then they've got a Speedwell steering wheel in here. There's quite a bit of different wheel styles in here on this catalog. There's 1, 6, 8 wheels. So, and they've got the old trusty pole position arcade game steering wheel. So, short shift kits are available in the 1965 catalog, and vent window locks. Pretty important thing with Volkswagen is to lock your vent windows so people will stop breaking in your car. And of course, the classic, door pulls, things to that extent. And then simulated walnut dash, those pieces, and the rear package tray where it has an opening hatch that you put underneath the back window on top of the back of the seat back, and it gives you a place to mount a couple speakers as well as a hatch that opens up so you can access the stuff inside the space behind your back seat. So again, it goes through tons of different accessories. They're calling them teardrop racing mirrors from Speedwell, which are like the Talbot racing mirrors. Lots of other, they're starting to do locking engine compartments, more catalogs, more tap and die sets, and just a lot of the typical things that everything really from now as Volkswagens are getting more popular, they've got like a repair loose rocker arm support stud in 45 minutes without removing the engine. EMPI will sell you this kit for $795, and you buy that kit and you're able to replace your rocker arm studs, because your rocker arm studs are pulling out because you got way too much cam in that bad boy. You got too sharp a ratio rocker, and that's one thing that I haven't seen in the catalog yet. But I do see this first time in the catalog that I'm seeing the bumper protectors. So the rubber guards that are on the end of the bumpers is 1965. And one of the reasons I started going down this hole was to see when EMPI started selling certain things, and 67 is kind of a big swing of a year with a lot of different stuff. And it's the first time that I see the name change in the catalog where it says it changes from European Motor Products to Engineered Motor Products Inc. is what it's changed to. Now, if you'll listen to that podcast I did with Joe Horvath and you look at the EMPI globe, the origins of that EMPI globe are the same as the Pan Am globe. It's just it's kind of squashed down a little bit, and then he put EMPI across the center. And that was a story Joe Horvath told me, who is one of the guys that was around back then. And now in this catalog, they have a 4-seat Sportster new for 1967. So if you like that car that looks like it was built on a brake, get yourself the Sportster 4-seater. Interestingly enough, in these catalogs, you start to see them offering high-performance clutch kits for the Volkswagen motor from 1100s all the way up to 1300s. So you've got the 11, the 12, and the 1300, and you can pick up a high-performance clutch. So you see the evolution as they start to get more into street and performance stuff, and they can manufacture some of these things. So it's definitely, you can see the evolution starting to pick up with the sales of Volkswagens as sales for VW start to increase at this time. And I don't think it really hits its heyday until the 70s. But before we get out of 67 is where you see the BRM advertised in. And interestingly enough, there's been a conversation of BRMs that were manufactured and that they may have been manufactured in 1966, like the end of 66. And they're saying that because there's not a lot of sets around. They're true magnesium. They were advertised as the BRM magnesium wheel, race car styling in a polished magnesium finish with flat black accents, wider than stock rims, 5 inches wide, give low profile tire effect with superior cornering, traction, made with 90% magnesium content. They reduce the unsprung weight by 3 pounds, 12 ounces per wheel. That's almost 4 pounds a wheel. Huge. Each wheel is fully guaranteed against faulty workmanship and material. Fits the 1967 VW and the 1200, 1300 series VWs and Ghia. Mag wheels are packed 2 to a box, complete with chrome lug assemblies and hub insert. Those wheels were $49 each. Amazing compared to what they sell for today. Also, one of the things you see in the 1967 catalog is you see the explosion of different luggage racks. As Volkswagen are becoming more popular, people are taking them on trips all over, and we've got to carry luggage. So there's luggage racks in here for Beetles, for Ghias, and ski racks, all kind of stuff, and actually bus racks in here as well. So that's in the 67 catalog. The racing stripe kit, the GTV racing stripe kit is available, which is a thick and a thin stripe that run down over the driver's head on the car from bumper to bumper over the top. So it's another interesting thing that's sold in this catalog. Now you start to see the EMPI Swinger, which is the exhaust, the GTV Sports Sedan. Now, this is the first time that you see in the catalog the Mark I, the Mark II, Mark III, and the Mark IV. And it shows the different the different levels of performance that you can get. So in the Mark 1, there's, to give you a quick rundown, you get the extractor exhaust, you get the GTV badging, you get Sprint Star wheels, chrome front fender shielding, which is the rocker arms, deluxe chrome bumper guards with rubber facing, so you get the rubber bumper strips, chrome taillights, chrome tail garnish. You get the True Track front anti-sway bar, simulated wood wheel, add a dash, walnut dash cover, the walnut dash set, the chrome glove box pull, the Coca mats, the easy short throw shifter, cigarette lighter, brake warning light, rear quilted deluxe parcel shelf, EMPI vent, camber compensator, rear stabilizer, and then extractor exhaust system, and of course GTV emblem. So that's the Mark 1. So when you're trying to figure out Mark 1, Mark 2, which one did you get? And my understanding is there was never any really paperwork done. These were all kind of dealer add-ons. So unless you have the actual sell paperwork, you're not going to see a bunch of that stuff that's going on there. But as you go to the sports sedan, it includes some other options, which looking at them, you can do a side-by-side comparison. Maybe one day I'll do a video where I just go through each one of these things, because that would take 40 minutes in itself. But in 1967 is the first year you start to see the GTV sports sedan, which is pretty cool, because the first bug that I remember seeing in the 90s that really started to get deep down into the whole GTV thing in the 90s started coming back was it was a feature called Lone Wolf in Hot VW's magazine. That car was owned by Scott Smith, and it was the first one that opened my eyes up to seeing a bunch of the GTV parts. The padded dash were some of the cool things that I remember. I mean, just a lot of key pieces that you really didn't see. And it was at the time in the 90s when the two-tone fad started going away, and then it was really big on getting EMPI, original EMPI stuff, or some of the BRM reproduction wheels. That was it was a cool time, and then it like exploded where everything was on that, and that car was owned by Scott Smith. Hoping to get him on the podcast, talk about the build, the time, the era. He's a big boat guy, painter, I think he is. Looking to try to get him on the podcast. I keep harassing him with phone calls every now and again, but really what I wanted to do at this time was just run through the catalog, what parts are available for what years, and a little bit of that evolution with EMPI with respect to their aftermarket parts. I think the 70s, 68 and later really deserve their own thing altogether, because 1968 is when they shift and change in the Beetle. 1967 is the last year. And some of you guys that might be listening that, most of but some of you guys that might be listening that think, why does everybody want 67 or earlier? And it's, at the time, it's often, I debate it quite a bit, because I believe in the 70s, people drove 68, 69 Beetles, and Cal looked them as well. In that time of the era, it was about upgrading performance in your car and making it perform better, which is disc brakes, bigger brakes, all that stuff, which you could get with all the later model vehicles. Now, 1967 is the last year for wide 5 lug. It's a 1500cc motor. It's the last year for the blade bumpers. And in 68, they do a whole model shift. It's the first time they do a major model change, and there's a lot that has to do with that. And maybe I'll do a whole podcast on the change of the new Beetle, and we'll go through some literature that Volkswagen came up with at the time. But for today, I just wanted to kind of go over the different things that were available in the EMPI catalogs. There's so much stuff to cover. You could just do an hour on one of the years of the catalogs, going through some of the pieces that are available. But I'm looking forward to having some more people on the podcast that are kind of EMPI deep down guru guys that are really into it, and they know all the latest, greatest, and coolest and rarest. But we're going to wrap this episode on that. Just doing a quick run through. It's a short one this week. I've got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm going to be going to EMPI this weekend, so make sure you watch the live stream. I'm leaving Monday evening for the UK, and then Bad Camberg and European Buggin'. And I'm going to be dropping some podcasts along the way from there. So there's some Yanks going that I'm going to be talking to, some people from the States that we'll be doing some podcasts with, a lot of people. It's turning out to be like this massive cruise. So make sure you guys go subscribe to Let's Talk Dubs YouTube channel, because I'll post up some short bits and put together some video stuff. I'll also make a video for this weekend, just run it down to the DKP meet, walking through, checking out some of the cars, maybe some quick interviews with some people. Nothing super over the top, but for sure I wanted to get you guys some of that content so you can get to experience some of the stuff that I do if you guys aren't out and about and conveniently located to the West Coast where I am. In addition, I think the overseas stuff is going to be unbelievable for you guys. It's the first time I'm going to be going to Bad Camberg, which is a huge vintage show in Germany. We're going to do a Wolfsburg plant tour and go check out the Carmen Ghia factory as well before we head off to European Buggin'. I'm excited. When I'm in the UK, I'll do a video with Andy about Zorba the Ghia, and I'm telling you, it's unbelievable, the product we're coming out. And I think what's going to happen now, Zorba the Ghia is going to stay under wraps until One Crazy Weekend. So, which reminds me, guys, don't forget to go register now at One Crazy Weekend. Go book your rooms, get them locked up. Make sure you guys are ready, because it's shaping up to be One Crazy Weekend. We've already got a lot of pre-registered, because the people that went last year, they're coming again this year, and it's just going to keep getting bigger and better. And I'm excited for that. So go to letstalkdubs.com to get your rooms booked. The links are on there. Click on the flyer on the front. I'll have some flyers with me this weekend to give out for One Crazy Weekend. And if you guys happen to see me this weekend at the DKP meet, or if you see me at the EMPI open house, say what's up. Let me know you're a podcast listener, and I may have a surprise for you. So, but before we wrap this up, I wanted to give a couple quick shout outs. Shout out to Brian Sheary for picking up some merch. Your stuff's on its way. So I know it's been a couple days. I've been busy moving my shop, but I appreciate you supporting the podcast. So look out for your stuff in the mail. Also, Deborah Taber sends me a message, and she says, will you be selling shirts at the event? We're coming from Hawaii and won't be doing the poker run. We'd like to buy some shirts and enter the poker game. Will that be possible? Yes, that's possible. We'll sell hands to people that don't have cars if you've got a ride, because we want everybody to have fun and have an opportunity to do it. And it's really the camaraderie of everybody cruising around. So we'll for sure offer that up as a last minute thing for people that are from out of town that don't have a car. But trust me, we've got plenty of people that are more than happy to cart you around. Brian Ahiri also sends me a message. He says, hey, I want to say thanks for the great podcast. Started listening about 6 months ago. I've since went back and listened to the first one, started listening to all of them. I heard where you said a few episodes ago you were going to have Eric Leclerc on. He's a good guy, but I cannot find the podcast. I took my 58 Oval to a couple of his shows when he had the shop in Alabama. I won second, the next year third for People's Choice. Anyway, did I miss it somewhere or did it not happen? Thanks. Keep up the great work. So, and he's got a list of cars: past VW 60 panel, 56 Oval, 73 Baja, current cars, 73 Street Legal Rail, 73 Beetle, 9% restored, and he is out of Alabama. Well, and so, so to answer your question on that, I did a podcast with Eric Leclerc, and I had a snafu with the card. There's a couple podcasts that are lost to history forever, and that's one of them. Coincidentally, he did a podcast about a week before that one was to be released on another podcast platform and another Volkswagen podcast. And I don't know if it ever got many listens or whatnot, but that's what happened with that one. Appreciate the message. And not sure if I read this one before, but I may be reading it again. But it's from Dave Galassi, which I'll be tracking you down this weekend, Dave. Be on the lookout for me. And he says, thank you. I just listened to your podcast for the first time. Russell Ludwig and Ron Roseveare. Great job. In case you're interested, the first narrow beam was built by name to be withheld because we're doing a podcast. The purpose was to get original BRMs, which had a negative offset to tuck under the fender. I'm looking forward to listening to some others. So appreciate Dave for listening, and I'm looking forward to. Dave needs to get on the podcast too, because he's trying to fly all low key like he's a nobody, but he's got some pretty cool cars. And really, isn't everybody a somebody in the Volkswagen world? At least they are to me. So we're going to be getting Dave on there because he's got some cool cars that I want to get some information on. So I hope you guys found this podcast interesting. There's some more detail behind Joe Vitone, a lot of that stuff that I want to do a podcast with a certain someone who's been doing a lot of research on that, and we plan to get one in the future. My main thing for this podcast was to show available parts when the catalogs came out and what parts you could get when I saw them coming in the catalog. So that to me kind of sets the tone with what parts are, let's say, year era appropriate. I don't think anybody, or who knows, maybe some people found a bunch of those stroker cranks that weren't counterweight at the time and have chucked them up to being a 1300 motor because of the displacement or the case number and things like that. So I wonder how many of those are sitting in a wood pile somewhere, but it remains to be seen. And I'm sure there's somebody out there listening that's really into collecting some of the old vintage stuff. So if you are, shoot me an email, bill@letstalkdubs.com. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, hit me up at bill@letstalkdubs.com. If you got complaints, keep them to yourself, man. I don't really, I'm kidding, man. We take them all. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys this weekend. And until next week, guys, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen.